Welcome to the Nick Bryant podcast. 2 weeks ago, I presented a narrated PowerPoint on the scandal that's unfolding around P. Diddy. An individual commented that he or she was surprised that my P. Diddy podcast didn't glean more views. I guess the reason for that is I didn't engage in rabid speculation, or perhaps I didn't mention the Illuminati or shape-shifting reptilians. However, I did show the Justice Department official who's going to be the point man for whatever needs to be covered up regarding P. Diddy. And no one in the legacy media and alternative media has a clue about the identity of this individual. Unfortunately, I gotta admit, that's not nearly as enthralling as the Illuminati and shape-shifting reptilians. But what can I say? I'm just not an Illuminati or shape-shifting reptilian kind of guy. Even though I realize that the media has groomed many people to choose salaciousness over truth, like in the Epstein case. For my Patreons who watched the entire podcast 2 weeks ago, you'll see much of the information that was in that podcast, but I've also added a lot of new information too. P. Diddy seems to have an affinity for sexual assault. As of March 2024, P. Diddy has had 5 sexual assault lawsuits launched at him. The first 3 lawsuits were filed in November of 2023. Thus far, one of those lawsuits has been settled. The first one was his longtime girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura. The second one was Joy Dickerson. The third lawsuit was filed by Lisa Gardner. And the fourth lawsuit was filed by a minor who goes by the name of Jane Doe in the lawsuit. And the fifth lawsuit was filed by Rodney Jones, which has received a tremendous amount of fanfare in the media because of the spectacular pyrotechnic allegations that Jones has made. Let's look at P. Diddy's life, a thug's life, the genesis. P. Diddy was born in Harlem in 1969. His father was a drug dealer and suspected informant, and he was murdered in 1971. P. Diddy was raised in Mount Vernon, New York by his mother. He graduated from Mount St. Michael Academy in 1987. And he attended Howard University for 2 years. Now he starts to get upwardly mobile after dropping out of college. In the late 1980s, Colmes worked as a talent director at Uptown Records. In 1993, he founded his own record label, Bad Boy Records, with Clive Davis, who we will discuss later. He became a hugely successful rapper in the 1990s. Colmes is also credited with the discovery of Notorious B.I.G., Mary J. Blige, and Usher. Colmes has a history of violence. In 1999, Colmes was charged with assaulting an Interscope Records executive and pleaded guilty to harassment. Also in 1999, after a shooting in a Manhattan nightclub where Colmes was partying with his then girlfriend, Jennifer Lopez, and bad boy artist Shine, he was charged with gun possession and bribery charges. He was acquitted, but Shine was sentenced to 10 years in prison for assault, reckless endangerment, and criminal possession of an illegal weapon. In 2003, a former Bad Boy Entertainment president sued Colmes, alleging that in 1996, Colmes threatened him with a baseball bat in hand into signing over his shares of the company. An appeals court dismissed the suit in 2006, ruling that the statute of limitations had expired. In 2017, Colmes' former cook sued him in a Los Angeles court because he made her work 16 hours a day and forced her to serve him food after the singer had sex with other women and was naked. When she complained, she was fired. In February of 2019, they reached a financial agreement. In a 2019 interview, Gina Hoon, Colmes' former girlfriend, said that during one incident in Miami, he, quote, stomped on my stomach really hard, like took the wind out of my breath. I couldn't breathe. He kept hitting me. I was pleading to him, can't you just stop? I can't breathe, unquote. So let's get into the lawsuits. The first one is Cassie Ventura versus Colmes. Ventura and Colmes met when she was 19 and he was 37, and they dated from 2007 to 2018. She was an R&B singer who was signed to Colmes' Bad Boy label, and she said she endured more than a decade of abuse, violence, and sex trafficking in a lawsuit filed on November of 23. Cassie alleged that Colmes would make her and his employees fly male sex workers to him in multiple cities in the United States, as well as abroad. According to the lawsuit, Colmes would give Cassie ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine, marijuana, alcohol, and other drugs in excessive amounts during these parties. According to Ventura's lawsuit, Colmes would film her with male sex workers and gave her explicit directions on what to wear, do, and say. These encounters were allegedly filmed on Colmes' phone, laptop, and tablets, and occasionally on Ventura's phone. Ventura's lawsuit recounted what life was like for her for 11 years, with details such as the rapper beating her several times a year and forcing her to carry his gun in her purse. And he also reminded her of his ability to cause her serious harm. Her lawsuit stated that he would make her have sex with prostitutes while he watched and masturbated in luxury hotels and in their own homes, hence the sex trafficking claim. Jane Doe versus Colmes. A woman identified only as Jane Doe filed a lawsuit alleging that Colmes and others coerced her into flying from Detroit to New York City to hang out with them at Colmes' studio in 2003 when she was 17 years old. According to the lawsuit, once the young woman arrived at the studio, Colmes, Harvey Pierre, who later became the president of Bad Boy Records, and a third unnamed assailant, got her inebriated, quote, to the point that she could not possibly have consented to having sex with anyone, unquote, and took turns raping her. The third lawsuit is Dickerson versus Colmes. Joy Dickerson was a college student at Syracuse University pursuing a degree in psychology. In January of 1991, while on school break for the holidays, she agreed to an early dinner with Colmes. They had friends and acquaintances in common, and she had appeared with Colmes in a few clips of a music video. During their date, Colmes drugged Dickerson and sexually assaulted her. Unbeknownst to Dickerson, Colmes videoed the sexual assault. Days later, a male friend revealed to her that he had viewed the sex tape along with other men. Liza Gardner alleges she was 16 years old when Colmes and R&B crooner Aaron Hall plied her with alcohol. The two men allegedly then took turns raping her. She recalled, quote, Colmes mounting her and forcing up her skirt, pulling her underwear to the side and forcefully penetrating her, unquote. The fifth lawsuit is Jones v. Colmes. Rodney Jones was a music producer who worked on Colmes' The Love album. The lawsuit claims that he was forced to solicit sex workers and perform sex acts to the pleasure of Mr. Colmes from 2022 to 2023. According to the lawsuit, Jones believed that Colmes drugged him before some of these sexual encounters. He also alleges that Colmes coerced him into recruiting sex workers by promising him money, property, and career advancement, as well as by threatening physical harm. Jones stated that underage girls were present at the sex parties that took place in Colmes' homes in New York, Miami, and Los Angeles, as well as a yacht he had rented in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The trafficking victims were also filmed. Jones further alleges that Colmes had hidden cameras in every room of his homes. Jones believes that those working for Colmes were filmed without their knowledge and consent, as were those who participated in Colmes' sex parties. Quote, Mr. Colmes possesses compromising footage of every person that has ever attended his freak-off parties and his house parties. According to the lawsuit, Colmes' chief of staff, Christina Coram, required all employees, including chefs, butlers, and housekeepers, to walk around with a pouch or fanny pack filled with drugs so Colmes could have his quote-unquote drug of choice whenever he wanted. Jones also alleges that Colmes ordered his staff to recruit sex workers for parties and that some of his staff were responsible for supplying him with illicit drugs. Jones accused Colmes of using threats, force, fraud, and coercion to usher minors into commercial sex acts, and of pressuring Jones to hire prostitutes for him in Miami, where sex work is illegal. The producer also said that Colmes set him up to be assaulted by Cuba Gooding Jr. and accused the actor of touching, groping, and fondling him on a yacht rented by Holmes. Here's an excerpt from Jones v. Combs. According to Mr. Jones, Mr. Combs did not check the identification of any of these underage girls. According to Mr. Jones, the presence of these underage women made him very uncomfortable. He attempted to leave, and Mr. Combs forced him to stay. And there was a shooting at Combs' chalet studio. An argument broke out in the recording studio between a rapper identified as Only G and Combs' son, Justin. The argument spilled into an adjacent bathroom, and the door was closed. Jones states he was approximately 2 feet away from the bathroom when multiple gunshots rang out. When the door opened, Jones then lifted G and brought him to the ambulance at the front of the studio. Combs gave strict instructions to inform the police that he had nothing to do with the shooting. He also forced Mr. Jones to lie to the police by telling them that G was shot standing outside the studio by a drive-by assailant. And Mr. Jones took some pictures of the bloodied bathroom. And this is from a CBS affiliate, KCAL. It's an article. And they're going along with the official story as created by P. Diddy. At the location, they found a man had been shot after stepping outside the studio. This is another excerpt from Jones' lawsuit, and perhaps it's an intimation of blackmail. First, Mr. Jones talks about Christian Combs drugging and sexually assaulting a woman, but then Mr. Combs detailing how he planned to leverage his relationship with Bishop T.D. Jakes to soften the impact on his public image of Cassie Ventura's lawsuit. And who is T.D. Jakes? Jakes is a pastor at a megachurch in Dallas. He is also a media mogul. Jakes was a producer for Miracles from Heaven and also a producer and actor in Angela Bassett's Jumping the Broom. He has a real estate empire outside of Texas, T.D. Jakes Real Estate Ventures. And in April of 2023, he announced a 10-year partnership with Wells Fargo that could result, quote, in up to $1 billion in capital and financing for underserved communities. Fim Muhammad is the head of P. Diddy's security. Muhammad was once head of security for Michael Jackson, so he knows how to keep secrets about child abuse. Jones alleges that Muhammad is an adept fixer. Jones claims he has connections in law enforcement that give him, quote, the power to make people and problems disappear. The Los Angeles Times on July 29th of 2009 reported on investigation into Michael Jackson's death. The Los Angeles Times reported on various pseudonyms that Michael Jackson used to procure prescription drugs. For example, Jack London, Josephine Baker, and he even used the name of his son, Prince Jackson. Strangely, Fim Muhammad is named, and that's definitely not a pseudonym. Is it possible that Fim Muhammad, as Michael Jackson's head of security, didn't know that Michael Jackson was using his name to procure prescription drugs? For his son's 13th birthday, Fim Muhammad bought him 40 acres of land in San Diego County, which shows that security has been very, very good to Fim Muhammad. Diddy and Clive Davis founded Bad Boy Records in 1993. Davis is legendary in the music biz. A documentary, Clive Davis, The Soundtrack of Our Lives, portrays Davis as a benign octogenarian who's launched the careers of numerous notable musicians. However, the documentary is essentially a self-serving infomercial. There's a very dirty side to the godfather of music, Clive Davis. Davis was indicted on 3 counts of tax evasion and 3 counts of filing false tax returns for the years 1970, 1971, and 1972. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of tax evasion, and the government ultimately charged Davis with failing to report $8,800 in taxes. When Davis was the president of CBS Records, it spent more than $250,000 a year on payola to Black radio stations. And payola is giving kickbacks to radio stations so that they will play whatever songs that you want them to play. Payola was officially outlawed in 1960 when Congress amended the Federal Communications Act. But Davis wasn't charged with a single count of payola. Davis and the Justice Department, a love story? A federal strike force against organized crime in Newark indicted Pasquale Falcone of the Genovese crime family for conspiring to smuggle 22 pounds of heroin into the United States. As the feds investigated Falcone, they uncovered an interesting arrangement between Davis and Falcone. Under Davis's supervision, Falcone set up companies that would concoct fake invoices for CBS, defrauding CBS Records of $94,000. Despite these various crimes, Clive Davis didn't spend a day in jail. The next sordid character to enter this tale is Andre Damian Williams Jr. And he shows that the fix is in, whatever that fix turns out to be. Williams was appointed U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York in December of 2018. He initiated the P. Diddy investigation. He also oversaw Ghislaine Maxwell's sham of a trial. According to the New York Times, Williams isn't your average U.S. attorney. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York is a position whose occupants have included future judges, senators, cabinet members, and a New York City mayor. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York is considered the most powerful position in federal law enforcement in Manhattan. Williams and the Epstein cover-up. Williams was slated to oversee the Epstein trial, but Epstein was preoccupied with his death. The Maxwell trial was an absolute sham. Maxwell and Epstein trafficked children together for approximately 3 decades, and she was merely indicted on 1 count of child trafficking, which carries a 15-year to life sentence. The federal prosecutors were aware of over 30 child trafficking victims, but they only called 4 victims as witnesses. And those victims had been exclusively molested by Epstein and Maxwell. The federal prosecutors were aware of various Epstein procurers, who we can call pimps, and numerous perpetrators. However, the prosecutor's flagrant objective was a cover-up of the Epstein procurers and perpetrators. The cover-up is consummated. Maxwell is found guilty on 1 count of child trafficking and sentenced to 20 years. None of the procurers are indicted, and none of the perpetrators are indicted. U.S. Attorney Williams on the verdict. U.S. Attorney Williams said, "Today's sentence holds Ghislaine Maxwell accountable for perpetrating heinous crimes against children. This sentence sends a strong message that no one is above the law, and it is never too late for justice. We again express our gratitude to Epstein and Maxwell's victims for their courage in coming forward and testifying at the trial and in sharing their stories as part of today's sentencing." Heinous crimes against children. Williams' statements in the wake of Maxwell's trial are very ironic because he just facilitated the cover-up of the largest child trafficking network ever acknowledged by law enforcement. The cover-up of a crime is aiding and abetting that crime. So the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, who was considered to be the most powerful federal law enforcement official in Manhattan, is guilty of aiding and abetting child trafficking. The possible reasons for Williams aiding and abetting child trafficking. Williams is willing to facilitate such heinous crimes because he cherishes his power and doesn't want to lose it. Williams himself is compromised, or Williams and or his family have been threatened. Let's take a look at Williams' background. His parents emigrated to the U.S. from Jamaica. Williams' father became a medical doctor and his mother a nurse. He attended the prestigious Woodward Academy for high school. In 2002, Williams received a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Harvard University. Andre Williams' Politico. Williams worked for John Kerry's 2004 presidential campaign. He was then a body man for the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Terry McAuliffe. In politics, a body man is a ubiquitous personal aide or assistant. Terry McAuliffe, welcome to the money machine. Quoting the New York Times, Mr. McAuliffe is a walking symbol of the wretched excess of the Clinton years. He raised millions in special interest money for President Clinton's campaign. McAuliffe also founded a company, Green Tech Automotive, which the Virginia Economic Development Partnership concluded was nothing more than a visa for sale scheme. Mr. McAuliffe resigned from the company. The FBI scrutinized a $120,000 donation made to McAuliffe's Virginia gubernatorial campaign by Chinese national Wang Wenliang. McAuliffe initially denied knowing Wang until a preponderance of evidence linked him to Wang, who also donated $2 million to the Clinton Foundation. With regards to Williams, should we ask ourselves if politics as usual rubbed off on McAuliffe's body man? The Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowships for New Americans. 30 Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowships are awarded every year with a selection rate of 1.2%. Each fellow receives up to $90,000 in funding toward their graduate education. Williams attended Yale Law School on one of those fellowships. Peter Soros is on the board of the Fellowships for New Americans, and he's also circled in Epstein's Black Book twice. Now, this could be a strange coincidence, or it could be something a little more ominous. 2 weeks after the raid on P. Diddy's LA and Miami homes, the Washington Post publishes a puff article on Williams, and it extols his virtues and introduces him to America. The article doesn't mention Ghislaine Maxwell and briefly mentions the P. Diddy raids as a, quote, human trafficking investigation, unquote. The take-home messages, according to Rowe, Gardner, and Jones, P. Diddy and his cronies have molested underage girls. Jones states that P. Diddy was running a blackmail enterprise with hidden cameras, and P. Diddy discussed leveraging Bishop T.D. Jakes, whose real estate empire seems to be at odds with his status as a preacher. If Jones' account is true about the shooting of G, the LAPD covered it up, or its forensic experts couldn't discern between a bullet fired at point-blank range in a bathroom or one fired from several yards away. Fim Muhammad has a history of keeping secrets, and Clive Davis has a history of skating on illegalities. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Andre Damian Williams Jr., also has a history of covering up child sex trafficking. P. Diddy ethical eunuch. I realize that a person is innocent until proven guilty, but 5 lawsuits allege that P. Diddy is a rapist and a child molester. And it's rare that people invent fictitious accounts of sexual assault. P. Diddy also has a history of violence. It isn't difficult to conclude that he might be a sociopath. P. Diddy has been implicated in a number of murders, including that of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. I believe that he is an ethical eunuch capable of sanctioning murders, but at this point, we don't have the evidence to definitively link him to murder. However, It will be very interesting to see how the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York treats P. Diddy's crimes.